In today's show, the latest Malcolm Brogden rumblings ahead of a slow trickle to start the NBA trade deadline. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, leading up into the trade deadline, we got the latest rumblings on Malcolm Brogden, talk a little bit about the slow and little bit of action we have seen thus far across the league. And then I want to talk about, to close the show, sort of the value of second-round picks. I think we've seen a lot of that action today, is the value of second-round picks. And the Blazers have some in the stable. They got one over the next 5 years. They got a surplus of one extra second-rounder. And I think that could be some value to them, either in coming or going. We'll talk about that to close the show. But let's get into it. We got some Malcolm Brogden scuttlebutt. This is kind of what I was hoping we would hear. This is the reporting I was hoping to hear, is kind of who was in on Brogden. The Blazers have been the reporting surrounding the Blazers, they've been reluctant, if not just straight up resistant, to trade Malcolm Brogden. It seems like part of that motivation is very obviously the injury to Shaedon Sharpe that's likely to keep him out for most, if not all, of the remainder of the season. But I have been enthusiastic here in my belief that the Blazers should I'd try to trade Malcolm Brogden, and they certainly shouldn't let the Shaedon Sharpe injury be the thing that dictates them not being able to trade Malcolm Brogden. The thing that should dictate whether or not they trade Malcolm Brogden is the market. Don't hang up the phones because you want to be a little more competent in the final 32 games. Think about next year's Blazers much more than this year's Blazers. Something that can improve the team down the line is obviously worth it. And so we have at least some rumblings of who might be calling, the phones are ringing, who's on the other line. Do you imagine like a bank of phones in the Blazers, a bank of like rotary phones in the Blazers offices that are like, the trade phone rings, Joe, pick it up. I don't think that's exactly how it works. But according to Kyle Neubeck of PHLY, that is the all-city vertical in Philadelphia, he covers the Sixers. Kyle's a really good beat writer. Kyle reports the Sixers, that's the Philadelphia 76ers, made inquiries about Portland's Malcolm Brogden, sources told PHLY, in the hope of adding the versatile veteran guard to their rotation. As of now, however, Brogden appears to be staying in Portland, with the Blazers content to hold on to Brogden unless they are bowled over with an offer. It's going to take a heck of a shot, a heck of a bowl to acquire Malcolm Brogden from this particular iteration of the Blazers. But this is what I was curious about. It's like, who might be making the calls? Philly definitely checks the boxes, right? They're a team that could certainly use a little more backcourt juice, and Brogden has that. Like, he's a good basketball player. He's going to get you, if you put him on the court, he's going to get you 15, 5, and 5. Like, he's just solid. He's spent 5 consecutive seasons, depending, his minutes have fluctuated a little bit because of his role, but his per 36 numbers for 5 consecutive seasons, 25 and 5. If you play Malcolm Brogden, he's just a consistently productive player, and he's been that for the Blazers yet again. So no surprise that a good team like Philly would be interested. Also, no surprise that the Blazers are said, nah, Philly doesn't have like a war chest of stuff to trade, right? They've got picks down the line. They can't trade because of some other deals. They can't trade near-term picks, but they can trade picks in 28 and 30. They're not going to trade 2 firsts for Malcolm Brogden. That's too much. But even 1 first, like, that's what Philly has to trade. So they probably wouldn't push that in to get Brogden, because they might save that for a slightly bigger fish. And if you're the Blazers, I think that's what you start the asking price at. Hi, we would like, a top 8 protected 2028 pick. I would, like, if Philly's giving you a first round pick that far out, I might take it. I might just, like, unprotected, obviously, in a heartbeat, right? In a heartbeat. No questions asked. 2028 unprotected pick from Philly. Take the bet. It's hard for maybe GMs to do that because they don't know if they'll be around. For me, I'm just a dude in the basement. I'm never going to work. I'm never going to work in the front office. So yeah, in a heartbeat, right? Because I would bet on Philly. Joel Embiid's 30 years old. Like, it's just, I would bet on them, that iteration of them not being really good again, and you take unprotected picks when you can get it. But like, that's probably not on the table, right? They're offering like, here are the second round picks we have, and Furkan Korkmaz and Marcus Morris and Nicholas Batum reunion if you're into it, or whatever it might be. Like, they don't, it's like, I don't think Jaden Springer's on the board. Like, it's like, they're not going to trade the good stuff they have, because Brogden is the kind of like half step upgrade that teams maybe with a surplus of things or like a really specific need. And Philly is in a weird spot where they don't have really specific needs. But I think this is what I wanted to hear from the Blazers, I guess, from my perspective, is that that they were still willing to entertain offers. It's, maybe we'll find out what was out there and what we won't, but it is interesting to me that this was out there, if nothing else. The Blazers, what they don't need to do is rush in to trade Malcolm Brogdon for a bad deal. That it doesn't necessarily benefit them in any way, right? Like, they don't need to trade him just to trade him. He's not entering free agency. They don't have to like get off him and get something or lose him for nothing. He's under contract for next season. So there isn't this like real push to get a deal, some kind of deal done. So there is no urgency. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of urgency, but there's no actual urgency that this deadline is going to be finite. This deadline is going to end something. But I will say, if what's going to change in the summertime if the Blazers don't trade Malcolm Brogdon, it looks like it's just like the nature of the market. And you're betting that the nature of the market will change. I don't think Malcolm Brogdon is going to suddenly become significantly more valuable, but what you're hoping is that the nature of the market is that when you get into the summer and teams, they've made it through the 2024 draft, so they can trade future draft picks, or they're comfortable trading future draft picks because they've made some other moves and they want to go all in, or they want to do this and that, or they need to move some money around. Like, the nature of the market will change. I don't know that the value in and of itself will change, but if the market changes, that might naturally bring the value up. But I will say, in general, I don't expect the Blazers to net multiple first rounders and a young player for Malcolm Brogdon. I expect them to hopefully get a protected first round pick out of it of some flavor. So if you're not getting it now, it could make sense down the line. I feel strongly that he needs to be traded in the offseason to some extent, but there is no reason to rush into it now. Like, no reason to rush into it now. So that's your latest on Malcolm Brogdon. It sounds like he's going to be here. The Blazers they're not playing hardball or whatever, but they don't want to take a bad deal. And they said, okay, if you want this dude on your team, pay up. Other teams probably reluctant to pay up just because of like what Brogdon brings. Another sort of minor note here, a long-time dream of this particular podcast was that maybe the Magic, who are like shooting starved and could use another point guard, would be willing to include Wendell Carter Jr. in a deal. And that was a deal I pitched a while ago, saying like, how about a deal with no picks just involving Wendell Carter Jr. because, the Blazers don't necessarily need to load up on draft picks. They just need like young veterans who could play. This is something I pitched over a month ago now on the program. Well, it's reported today by Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports that inquiring teams have learned that Wendell Carter Jr. is off the board, not available for a trade. So the dream is gone. That's that. In the second segment, let's talk about the deadline. We've seen some moves today. We've seen some minor moves today. Let's talk about what we've seen and who's making moves and who's going where. And then let's kind of talk about value and what second round picks mean in the modern NBA through a Blazers lens to close the show. Before we do that, let's talk Nissan. The good folks over at Nissan want to know if you're the kind of driver that likes to push things a little bit further, or if you ever wonder what adventure could be just right around that next corner. And our friends over at Nissan have a line of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level, just like the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great for escapes. It's got class-exclusive Google built in. It's your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. You got Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play Store built right into a 12.3-inch HD touchscreen. It's the information system with all the information right there at your fingertips. And the 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. But the Nissan lineup doesn't just include the Rogue. The Nissan's incredible lineup for 2024 also includes the Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8, so you can bring the whole gang, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capabilities, so you can take the whole gang off-road if you want to. And check this out, 284 horsepower, up to 6,000 pounds of towing. When a venture calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. You can bring everybody you know and all their stuff with you. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the all-new 2024 Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right. We saw some trades today. It's been you are listening to Trade Deadline Day show. This is Thursday, February 8th show. I'm recording this on Wednesday evening, and today we saw a couple little deals trickle out. Simone Fontecchio is headed from the Utah Jazz to the Detroit Pistons. In a separate deal, the Pistons agreed to send backup point guard Monte Morris over to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Boston Celtics loaded up on some front court help, acquiring Xavier Tillman. These are minor deals. You might not know Simone Fontecchio. You might not know Xavier Tillman. Maybe you do. You might not know Monte Morris, count of money, assist to turnover ratio. It's a better joke written out. I think Monte Morris is a known quantity, and Xavier Tillman's been in some playoff series, known quantity, and Fontecchio's been starting for the Jazz. And also, you listen to Locked On Blazers, you might just be a really big NBA fan. I'm joking, but the larger point is that if you were expecting fireworks, they haven't happened yet, and they might not be coming. I will say this, like as a caveat, thinking about this. The fireworks we expected kind of already happened, right? Like OG Anunoby got traded to the Knicks and Pascal Siakam got traded to the Pacers. Those are big deals. It just Masai Ujiri just like moves at his own pace. You're running a marathon and he's running an ultra, so he's actually just he's late for last year's trade deadline as opposed to early for this one. And he's so it's not like nothing happened, right? Like those are like. Pascal Siakam is a former All-NBA guy. OG Anunoby's a very, very good and long coveted wing. And RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly moved in that trade. And like, it's not like nothing has happened at this sort of, to use a phrase from Neil Olshey, this acquisition cycle. But, part of me misses the nonsense of Neil Olshey's vocabulary. It's not like nothing has happened at leading up to this. It's just leading up to this trade deadline. It's just the like actual deadline is usually when stuff really heats up. Deadline spur action is the common phrase, right? And so far, 24 hours, it's like, oh, Simone Fontecchio, let's go. And he's pretty good. Like he could really shoot it, and he's big, and he's been helpful for the Jazz this year. And I think in theory he'll be helpful for the Pistons, who are shooting starved. And I think the Wolves they're it depends on what your feelings on Jordan McLaughlin are, but I think they upgraded their backup point guard spot. I think Monte Morris is really solid. If nothing else, he never turns the ball over. And there is some value in just not making mistakes. And Xavier Tillman helps the front line of the Celtics, right? Like, yeah, I don't know that he's going to play in every playoff game, but like they needed to bolster their bench a little bit. He certainly does that. I think X is probably the most impactful player that got moved today. And I think the Celtics did a good job to track him down, right? But in general, if you were expecting Kyle Kuzma and DeJounte Murray and Malcolm Brogden or whoever it might be, like it doesn't seem like, Bruce Brown, maybe he'll get moved, right? But like the best teams, Denver and probably the Clippers are unlikely in the West are unlikely to do things. OKC is probably unlikely to really chase it down. Minnesota made its minor move. In the East, the Bucks just don't have anything left to trade. The Celtics made their minor move. The Sixers are exploring, but they're in a weird spot, without Joel Embiid, exactly what they might do. like the teams behind the Knicks already made their big splash. Cleveland, it seems like they've got their group locked in. So it seems like the teams at the top of the conference maybe don't either just like straight up don't have assets to trade, like the Clippers and the Bucks, or they. I guess James Harden got traded this season. That's a pretty big one that I didn't include in the acquisition cycle. But like, the teams at the top of the conference have cashed in their parts, and so it's like they're cashed in their chips. So it's like, how can they add more parts? They just have like limited assets to do so, and everyone else, like, you don't. Maybe teams in the middle are less incentivized to make their move. I think like there is some logic to it not having as many fireworks. Some of the stuff has already gone down and the moves have been made, and then there's some other teams like like Denver. They're pretty good. They have like a perfect starting lineup. If something comes up, it comes up, but they don't need to make a move. They can win a championship. They can just stay healthy and win a title. Like they're that good. And Boston, they added Xavier Tillman to a really good roster. So I don't think that I like tomorrow stuff's going to happen, or today, as you're listening to this, today on Thursday, stuff's going to happen. Typically when you get up to the deadline, teams get, the deals they've been considering, you kind of have to make your move. You have to make your decision. Deadlines at noon Pacific time tomorrow, they'll have to make a decision. 11:59, they'll have to make a decision. And I expect we'll see some movement. I don't think this is it. I don't think it's going to be, Xavier Tillman moved a little bit. And remember when they traded James Harden way back when? Like there's going to be some action, but I think there is reason to believe that the market is going to be relatively slow, and that points back to the Trailblazers. If the market is relatively slow and teams either are unable or unwilling to put in the assets, of course you're not going to find a suitor for Malcolm Brogdon. It's why I have been on this podcast the last 3 days just saying, like, the market has to dictate what they do. They aren't in a desperate situation where it's the end of the world if they don't trade their veteran players, but like there's no reason to say we won't. Let the market dictate it. And right now the market looks a little quiet, a little sleepy. The moves either happened earlier or it's hard to pull off. And I think teams are really clinging to first round picks in the sort of new climate of the new CBA, where it's like, this is our most valuable thing to trade. And players don't move, good players don't move in free agency. It's like, it's very rare that all-stars move in free agency. The way to acquire star players is to have first round picks to trade. So teams don't want to trade them for players below that tier, right? Like, if it costs 2 first-round picks to acquire Kyle Kuzma, is that worth it? Or do we want to wait? If it costs a first-round pick and something else to acquire Malcolm Brogdon, is that worth it? Or do we want to wait? And I think that's where you're up against it, right? It's like the split between buyers and sellers in an increasingly punitive financial world where teams they don't know it yet. They don't know the rhythms, and maybe in 4 or 5 years they'll know the rhythms and things will move a little more freely. But in the new world of CBA, where teams are kind of figuring out, ownership's kind of figuring out, I think teams are tentative to let go of some of their juicier assets, figuring out, knowing that like trades and trading for star players is the only way that you acquire stars, is acquire all-stars these days. Guys just don't move teams in free agency the way they freely did. It's like, Jalen Brunson switches teams in free agency, but he wasn't an all-star until he went to his new team. Like, rarely guys who have an all-star pedigree enter free agency and switch teams. It's been increasingly rare in the modern NBA. So you got to kind of keep your assets at hand. I don't think that's great news for the Blazers as a team that wanted to be sellers, because it just sounds like the market isn't going to come up for them. So they're just going to move into the offseason and hope the market changes for them, and then they'll have to make their moves. One of the things I think we saw today, though, in the Tillman trade and the Fontecchio trade and the Monty Morris trade is second-round picks changing hands. And increasingly, with teams coveting first-rounders or having already traded their first-rounders or owing first-rounders because they've traded because 3 different teams in the league have traded for Kevin Durant recently or whatever it is. And Kyrie Irving, it's second rounders are a real currency. So let's talk about the value of second rounders and what we saw from that today and what it means for the Blazers moving forward. That's what we'll do to close the show. But first, let me tell you about PrizePicks. It's America's #1 sports app with over 3 million users. And it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than on a 2 to 6 player stat projection entry. And then you watch the winnings roll in. And right now, it's demon time on PrizePicks. You can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at PrizePicks. Here's how it works. When you're making your entry, looking on the app, the squares that are marked with a low red demon or low green goblin, you get different payouts. So now you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 of those correct picks. So go find the demons, go find the goblins, and win yourself some money. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. They will match you dollar for dollar on your first deposit up to $100 when you go to prizepicks.com and use that code LockedOnNBA. It's PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk about the value of second-round picks. I think we saw today how sort of the cycle of second-rounders kind of play out. For a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, they acquired Xavier Tillman in the second round, and he was heading into free agency. And when he was heading into free agency, he wasn't going to be part of their plans in the future, so they shipped him out for what they could get for him. And that was a minimum contract guy who I believe the reporting suggests from Chris Harrington that they're going to waive. So it's like not someone who's going to be part of the players. Lamar Stevens, we hardly knew ye, and a couple second rounders. Make a second round pick, have him be a productive member of your team for a little bit, and then flip him for 2 future second round picks. The life cycle of a second round pick in the NBA. You are as valuable to your team as bench production. You're a valuable role player off the bench. And when they don't want to pay you to be a long-term part off the bench, you are sent to be that on another team. And in comes 2 future yet unknown role players off the bench in the form of future second rounders. It's a full life cycle. But you also see the value in both directions with the second round picks. The Celtics just don't have. What else are they going to trade? Right? They have an extremely expensive roster. They don't have a bunch of tradable contracts. The second rounders are their currency. And what do? They find a serviceable backup big. Xavier Tillman is not like a starting level player. He started a bunch of games for Grizzlies because they've been very injured, but he's not a starting level player. He's not even a play every night type of guy. But in a specific matchup, his size, his strength, helps, right? Like he can be the backup big that you need. Again, not every game, but in certain games, valuable. What's that worth to the Celtics? 2 second round picks. So when you are a team that's going for it, second round picks help you cash in and go for it. Or when you're a team on the other side, second round picks help you find cheap depth. Think about the Blazers. Jabari Walker and Toumani Camara drafted in the 50s. That gives you cheap depth. And those players can either become part of your future or you screw it up and Jalen Brunson goes and signs with the Knicks. But they can be part of your future and you get them on long-term deals like the Blazers have with both. They didn't draft Toumani, but they acquired him before he played a game for his other team. Clearly, they valued him, even though he was a second-round pick. But it's kind of same idea. There is valuable depth in the second round. I guess what I'm getting at here. And Toumani's on a 4-year deal. Jabari Walker's on that on a same type of deal with non-guaranteed money into the future. You have this cheap depth, and either these are guys who play and grow into your system, and you sign them, and they become second contract guys in the league, or you end up trading them for second rounders. Second round picks are an avenue for young teams to get, or for all teams to get that sort of cheap, cost-controlled young players on the team, particularly in the new world of the CBA, where everybody's getting punished for having an expensive roster. Finding players that are super cheap and outperform a super cheap second round contract is going to be incredibly valuable for teams. And, just because there are more punitive rules about having a really expensive roster, and it's pretty clear that to compete at the level of championships, you gotta have a really expensive roster. If you're not that, like if you're the Blazers, it's just a way to get good players on the cheap, right? As you kind of build into what you are hoping to be as a championship level roster sometime down the line. So, step one, and this is, I will say that this sort of thought here comes from a friend of the program, Sean Coleman, who former host of Locked On Grizzlies, and now writes for a bunch of places, including Bluff City Media, where he writes about the Grizzlies. But Sean pointed this out. It's like you can find your cheaper depth pieces. There are avenues to go for it, right? You look at the what a team like the Celtics was able to do. They threw in a whole bunch of picks to make it happen. Last year at the trade deadline, you know what the Bucks did? They traded a cajillion first-round picks. I believe it was 5 in the end. Three in one way, 2 in the other direction. Like 2 in one trade, and then 3 to clear some cap space to acquire Jay Crowder. They traded 5 draft picks to acquire Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder's not even good, but like they were a team that was a championship hopeful. They wanted a veteran physical wing to add next to Giannis Antetokounmpo to move forward, and what they had to trade were seconds, right? So they're cash-in pieces, they're cheap depth pieces, they're cash-in pieces for contender types when you need to like make your move and you're not going to trade first rounders. This is how you add depth around the edges of the roster. And there are avenues to move up in the draft. If you have multiple seconds and you say like, okay, we're not going to get this dude if he falls below 33, but we have 41 and 44. Okay, let's make our move, right? Let's if you have a surplus of picks and you have someone targeted, you can find that exactly the player you want. And the Blazers have done this in the past, like targeting Gary Trent Jr. Okay, this is a dude we want. It's pretty darn good second round pick, turned into a decent NBA player, although he's not having the season you would want old Gary this year. The Blazers don't have a major surplus of picks over the next 5 years. They're going to have one extra one, but they've got 2 in 2024. They've got 1 in 2025, although it has some protections. 1 in 2026 has some protections. They do not have a second rounder in 2027, and they have 2 in 2028. So that's over the next 5 drafts. They'll have that totals to 1 extra second rounder. So as they continue to make trades, and the Blazers have, they kind of reloaded their what was a relatively empty war chest as second rounders last year at the trade deadline. It's like, loading up on seconds wouldn't be the worst thing that happened. And I mentioned this all to say, if they do end up flipping Brogden down the line and what they get is like 4 seconds or like a protected first that they're never going to get that's going to turn into second and 3 other seconds, right? If they end up getting 4 second round picks from Malcolm Brogdon, it might not feel great, but these things have value in the back end. They really do. They really do. And particularly in the new world of the NBA, this is how you find depth, both in the draft and on the trade market. Luke Kennard moved from the Clippers to the Grizzlies for 4 second rounders, right? It's like the Grizzlies were an expensive roster that needed extra shooting. They didn't have anything else to trade. What is a good team? It's like a 50-win team at the time. What is a team on pace to win 50 games without shooting do? They cash in and go get Luke Kennard, and he was helpful in he led the league in 3-point shooting. It's like when you get good, these have value, and when you are a team that isn't particularly good, you can load up on as the Detroit Pistons did. You get or they kind of 1 in 1 out, but it's like you trade a couple picks to the Jazz for Fontecchio, and you get back a couple picks in exchange for Monty Morris, and you continue to have those opportunities there. I don't know about Fontecchio for the Pistons. It seems fine. I think it's inoffensive, but it seems like a weird priority for them. He's 28 or 27. So like it's, I think what we're going to see, and I kind of just cautioning you with thinking going forward is like, if Blazers do end up with like not getting first rounders or prioritizing second rounders, these things have some value. They have some value in both directions for good teams, for bad teams, and for teams who can draft well. And if the Blazers can hit on players who are look like NBA level contributors like Jabari Walker in the second round, deep second round, then having more second round chances can be valuable. And they've got 2 of them in this upcoming draft, and 2 firsts. I think they're unlikely to get 4 rookies on the roster next season. Seems relatively unlikely. So we could see some consolidation coming in the future for the Blazers. And I think the value of second rounders, as we saw today, will come right back into play. Okay, tomorrow's show, we will recap whatever happens to the trade deadline. I got a feeling not much, but I'm wrong all the time. So if it's not much from the Blazers, if it's nothing, we'll talk about what the implications of nothing and look around the league at everything else that happened. And if they do make a move, check it out right here. I didn't mention this. I should have, but I'm not great at this, so I'll mention it today and try to mention it tomorrow. On Friday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, I'm going to do a little live stream on the Bleacher Report app. So if you're someone who has a Bleacher Report app, or you're someone who is capable of getting a Bleacher Report app, download it on Friday at 12:30 p.m., and I'm going to go live on there. And it'll be like a special extra little bonus podcast episode for you. So if you're looking, and you can ask questions live in the chat. It's a fun little interactive thing. So if you're looking for it, download the Bleacher Report app, make sure you're following the Blazers, and you will see it when I go live. All right, tell your friends about the show, and come back tomorrow because it's trade deadline day, a big old day in the NBA world. Come back and we'll cover everything that happens and all of its Blazers ripple effects. All right, I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.